I didn't mean to shatter the silence like that, but when I screamed her name in the middle of my brother's funeral, it was like every molecule of air froze. People turned, sharp suits, tear-soaked faces, disapproving eyes. I wasn't supposed to be there, and she definitely was. My mother's jaw tightened the way it always did when she was holding in shame she thought belonged to someone else, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to stand at the edge of my own grief, pretending like the love of my life hadn't held me the night I found out Jamie had died. I didn't care that the church had rules, that my father had called her a phase and my aunt had whispered about praying it away. I cared that she was there, standing behind the last row, her fingers trembling around the funeral program she wasn't invited to hold. So I called her name, loudly, clearly, because grief doesn't follow etiquette and neither does love. Worst part, I didn't even know if she'd come. We hadn't spoken in 3 months, not since her parents found the letters we wrote each other and burned them on the front lawn like a ceremony. Not since they dragged her back to their house upstate and locked down her phone, deleted her accounts, and pretended she was dead to the world. But she came. She stood there with fire in her eyes and tears on her cheeks, and when I broke through the stunned crowd to get to her, I felt everything I'd been forced to numb. I collapsed into her arms. It wasn't quiet and it wasn't polite, and I knew everyone around me was cataloging this moment into whatever version of disgrace they believed in. But she held me anyway, tighter than ever. And then came the twist I hadn't braced for. My mother walked straight up to us, looked right past me, and slapped her, slapped her. The sound was so loud it echoed across the pews, bounced off stained glass, and cracked something in me I didn't know was still whole. I remember screaming again, this time in fury, not because of the slap, but because of what she said right after. "You ruined my son, he died ashamed because of you." And just like that, the funeral became a war zone, except this time the battle wasn't over a coffin, it was over the living, over truth, over us. That moment, it lit the fuse. Everything that happened next, it exploded from that second, from that lie. Because what my mother didn't know, and what no one at that funeral knew, was that Jamie wasn't ashamed. He was like me. He died hiding not just my secret, but his own. And the only person who knew that was the girl I loved, who had a letter in her pocket that could burn everything down or save it all. The slap echoed in my bones for days after. My mother's words repeated in my mind like a song I couldn't escape, and every time I thought of Jamie's face pale in that coffin, I felt the sting all over again. We buried him on a Friday, but by Sunday, everything about our lives had changed. The whispers from the funeral followed me like shadows. People I'd grown up with, people I had loved, now turned their backs. They would never understand. They couldn't, but she understood, and I needed her, desperately. I hadn't seen her since the funeral, hadn't heard from her. My mother made it clear I wasn't to see her again, that there were lines that couldn't be crossed. I'd spent every hour of the weekend wondering if she would ever reach out, if she'd disappear into the same dark hole Jamie had, or if by some miracle she'd still be waiting for me the way I had always waited for her. Monday came and I found myself standing outside her apartment building. I didn't have a plan, just the desperate hope that somehow this would end differently than everything else in my life, that this time I could break through the walls of silence she had built around herself. The door buzzed before I could second-guess myself, and when it opened, there she was. A little thinner than I remembered, but her eyes still the same, soft, understanding, full of love that never asked for permission. "I thought you'd never come back," she said softly, her voice a mix of relief and pain. "I almost didn't," I admitted, stepping inside. "I thought maybe we were both wrong, maybe we shouldn't have fought so hard." Her hand reached for mine, and the electric charge between us was undeniable, but before I could say anything else, she took a breath that felt like it was breaking her, and then the twist came. She didn't ask how I was, she didn't ask about Jamie. Instead, she whispered, "They're coming for us. I got the papers today, the court papers. They're going to take me away again." I felt the ground shift beneath me. My own grief, my own broken heart, was nothing compared to what she was facing. I knew the stakes now. It wasn't just our love, it wasn't just my mother's cruelty or the town's judgments, it was her freedom, her future. They weren't going to stop until they locked her away again, this time for good. But I was done being scared, done being silent. I looked her in the eyes and made a promise I never thought I would be strong enough to keep. "We'll fight this. Together, we'll show them that they can't win." And for the first time since Jamie's funeral, I believed it. The first court date came quicker than I expected, days, not weeks. It was like they'd been waiting for a reason to drag us through the system, to separate us like they always planned to. Her parents had already filed for a restraining order, painting her as unstable, dangerous even, and claiming she was a threat to herself and anyone who got close. They said she was a bad influence, that our relationship was part of her rebellion against them. They had lawyers, documents, and stories. They had the entire weight of their wealth and influence behind them. All we had was each other and a stubborn resolve that burned hotter than anything they could throw at us. But that's when I realized something terrible, something twisted. We weren't fighting just for her freedom anymore. We were fighting for my own too. The lies my mother told in front of the church, the ones she used to justify hurting me, those had consequences. Because now the people who mattered most in my life, the ones who had the power to make or break us, saw us as nothing more than a threat. On the day of the hearing, I had no idea what we were walking into. We sat in a sterile waiting room, our hands clasped together, trying to hold on to the only truth we knew in that moment. We loved each other and nothing else mattered. But that's when I saw it. A file on the lawyer's desk, opened just enough for me to catch a glimpse of the pages, photographs. My blood ran cold. They were pictures of me, photos of us together, some taken when we thought no one was watching. Others from times I thought we were safe, snapped by someone who knew how to turn love into something shameful, something criminal. My heart pounded as I realized that someone had been watching us the whole time. My own parents, my own town had turned against us before we even realized the stakes. They wanted to burn us down before we could rise. I turned to her, my voice trembling. They have photos. They're using this to make it look like. I couldn't even finish the sentence. I could feel the walls closing in, but she squeezed my hand and gave me a small, determined smile. We don't fight their war, we fight ours. We're not the ones in the wrong. It was her strength, her unwavering belief in us that kept me grounded. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. And in that moment, I realized what this was really about, not just proving that we could be together, but proving that love, true love, couldn't be taken away by fear, shame, or even the law. We had no money, no power, but we had truth. We had our story. And that, I promised myself, was going to be the thing that broke them. Because no matter how many pictures they showed, no matter how many lies they told, the one thing they couldn't take away was the way we made each other feel. They could call it whatever they wanted, but we knew we were real, and we would fight for our right to exist. The courtroom was cold, like the air was intentionally frozen to numb us, to make us feel small. It wasn't just a battle for her anymore. It was a trial of every moment we had fought through together, every hidden kiss in the back of a library, every whispered "I love you" exchanged in the dark, stolen from the world that said we couldn't be. Her parents sat across the room, their faces cold and indifferent, as if we were an inconvenience they needed to dispose of. Their lawyer was sharp, precise, and ruthless, slashing through every piece of evidence we had. But I saw something that shook me, a crack in their armor. It wasn't in their eyes, but in the way they avoided the truth, our truth. They spoke of instability, of how our relationship was toxic, how it was damaging to both of us. But with every word they were digging their own grave. They could lie, they could claim to be concerned for her safety, but they couldn't hide what was really at the root of this: fear, fear of something they didn't understand, fear of something they couldn't control. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, our lawyer, our fierce, little-known champion, stood up. She wasn't the polished, well-dressed powerhouse I had imagined. She was young, with unruly brown hair, eyes that had seen too much injustice, and a voice that could cut through any bullshit. She walked to the center of the room with a quiet confidence that made the air buzz. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her gaze never leaving the judge, "this is not a case about safety. This is a case about control. And I ask you, why are we so afraid of love?" She paused, letting the question hang in the air, her eyes scanning the room. "This young woman," she said, pointing to her, "has done nothing wrong. She has loved the person she was meant to love, and yet for that she is being dragged through this system. So I ask again, why are we afraid of love?" The room fell into stunned silence. I could feel every breath she took, every word she spoke sinking deep into my chest. I could see the cracks in the opposition, the way the smugness that had once defined them was now replaced by something else: fear. Her words were sharp, but it wasn't the words that cut through them, it was the truth behind them, our truth. And as the judge leaned forward, his brow furrowed in thought, I felt my heart race. This wasn't a case of law anymore. This was a battle for the very thing we had been told we could never have. We were more than a fight for freedom. We were standing at the precipice of change, not just for us, but for anyone who had ever been told they couldn't love. And as I caught her gaze across the room, the girl who had been with me through every storm, I realized that no matter what happened, we had already won. The world may never fully understand, but we had proved one undeniable truth: love was not a crime, and they couldn't take that from us. The decision came just hours later, an impossibly tense, weighty silence hanging in the air as we waited. The courtroom buzzed with nervous whispers, but I couldn't focus on any of it. All I could think about was her smile when I whispered that I loved her before we entered the courtroom, her soft hand holding mine like it was the only thing keeping us both alive. I kept replaying her words from earlier that day: "No matter what happens, this is our victory." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that no matter how the judge ruled, we had already defied the world. We had already proven that love was stronger than any law, any rule, any wall they tried to build around us. But the weight of their power, of everything that had been stacked against us, gnawed at me. What if this was just another battle lost, another dream crushed beneath the heel of their hatred? The door swung open and the judge walked in, his face unreadable, his posture stiff as he took his seat. My breath hitched in my chest. After careful consideration, he began, his voice surprisingly steady. I have come to a decision. I could hear the words, but they felt distant, muffled by the rush of blood in my ears. My heart was pounding, thudding against my ribcage as if it were trying to escape. I glanced at her and her hand squeezed mine, the only anchor in that whirlwind of fear. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw clenched as if she were ready to absorb whatever came next. But then, in the most unexpected moment of the entire ordeal, the judge did something neither of us expected. He paused, long enough to make everyone uncomfortable, long enough to make us wonder if maybe, just maybe, he was seeing something we had been trying to show the world all along. I am dismissing the restraining order, he said, his voice clear and resolute. There is no evidence to support the claims of harm or danger in this relationship. Furthermore, the actions of the plaintiff seem motivated not by concern but by control. The room was quiet, the air was still. For a split second I thought I had misheard him, that the relief was only a mirage. But when the reality of the words hit, it was like the ground beneath us shifted. My knees nearly buckled from the rush of emotion, from the release of everything I had been holding in. She looked at me wide-eyed, breathless, and we didn't need words. The world that had tried to keep us apart, the family that had cast us out, the society that had refused to accept us, had just been told they were wrong. They had no power here, not anymore. We didn't walk out of that courtroom as victims. We walked out as a testament to something bigger, something that couldn't be destroyed by fear or hate or even the law. We walked out hand in hand, knowing that we had proven them wrong. And as I looked at her, the girl I had once thought I could never have, the girl who had been my safe place, my everything, I whispered once more, "We did it." But as we stepped into the sunlight, I realized it wasn't just about us anymore. It was about the world we were creating, a world where love couldn't be silenced, where we couldn't be erased. And as the doors closed behind us, I knew that our journey wasn't over, it was just beginning.